All right. So let's now go back to your professional career. Specifically, how did you end up becoming a professional dancer? And you'll need to also bring in the story of your brother whenever it comes into the story.
Yeah, so as far as dancing goes, again, I wasn't out to pursue that in college, but I got a coaching job and I ended up...
Did you finish BYU or drop out? Or?
No, I ended up transferring to Weber while I was in my second marriage because I lived closer to Weber. So I didn't graduate from BYU. When I married Joe, I stopped going to school and we put Joe through school.
Oh, no. So that's kind of a typical Mormon thing that feminists don't like, that women too often sacrifice their...
Yes, a huge regret.
Yeah.
I deeply regret that.
So
but
finish your education, women, if you want that.
Please.
Do that.
Yeah. But yeah,
so did you finish at Weber? What did you study at Weber?
I changed my major from dance to marketing and I didn't finish it.
Okay.
But I taught and coached high school dance for 3 years.
So you got into that? How did you get?
I just heard about an opening and applied.
Was this Lone Peak or?
I started at Juan Diego.
Okay.
So I coached 1 year at Juan Diego, then I coached 2 years at Lone Peak.
And what was that like?
It was awesome. It was the most challenging experience of my life. It was very, very challenging. I was a head coach at like 21. I think I was 21 years old.
And these girls. At least Lone Peak is one of the biggest, wealthiest, most powerful high schools in the state,
Yeah, Lone Peak was a big deal. It was a huge opportunity for me, and that was great. A huge challenge, but so fulfilling and rewarding. That coaching was, I don't think I was ever more personally fulfilled than when I was coaching, because I could see that I had an influence on the girls and to just give back in a form that I was so familiar with. And dance had done so much for me in my life and had made such a huge impact on who I am as a woman. And to be able to give that back to other girls was so awesome.
Explain that, what dance did for you or what it meant to you. How did it give to you?
Wow. I don't even there aren't enough words to say what that had done for me over the years. I think dance allows you to connect emotionally, connect with yourself and connect to your emotions and process through things. And it's artistic. And not only that, but it's physically challenging. So it had taught me a lot about discipline, but a lot about connection too. It made me handle my emotions and process them in a very healthy way. And it also gave me an appreciation for my physical body and what I was capable of in that sense. And, teamwork, being on a team in high school taught me to work with other girls my age. I mean, and then on dance company, leading other girls my age, they're just what dance and the instructors and coaches that I've had over the year, there aren't enough words to say how many wonderful things I learned from that.
Okay. So what was it like and by the way, Lone Peak is in Utah County, and in some sense that Alpine Highland area is like Provo. It's intensely Mormon.
I think it's I want to say it's like 96 or 97% LDS.
And at Mike Peak. Lee lives there, the guy who did Work in the Glory, whatever his name is. Yeah. It's intensely. It's
so conservative. I had to watch myself. Like my last year, because my last year of coaching, I was fully out of the church, and I had to really watch, what music I played and what I said and how I acted and behaved, and I was definitely under some eyes while I was at Lone Peak, and it was good. Lone Peak was an amazing school and great faculty, great parents. I had a really, really great experience there, but it's so conservative.
Okay, so. Did you notice anything about the impact, positive or negative, of Mormonism on those high school kids at Lone Peak and the girls specifically? Anything?
In some ways, and I would relate this to my own experience growing up Mormon. In some ways, of course, it has a positive impact. Again, the morality that comes at that young age, I am so grateful that I didn't have a drink of alcohol until I was an adult. I am so grateful that I didn't have sex until I was an adult, because it allowed me to focus on things that were, I guess, focus on the more important things when I was in high school. So the girls that I coached were incredible girls. They were so hardworking. They were honest. They tried to be the best version of themselves. So in that way, yes, Mormonism had a wonderful impact on the students. The flip side of that absolutely comes back to the pressure. Lone Peak breeds winners. I mean, you think about students that are picked up by BYU, and
football team, basketball team,
and even ultimately end up
rugby,
playing professionally. There's a lot of that at Lone Peak, and so the pressure to perform and to excel there. I mean, most of the girls on my team had above a 3.5 GPA, with a number of them having 4.0s. And most of their families were wealthy, and most of their families were active LDS. And so for the girls who didn't fit that mold in one way or another, they stood out in a lot more than they would have at probably many other high schools.
Okay. And my understanding is there was kind of a suicide epidemic at Lone Peak during the time you were there. Do you remember any of that?
Yes, I remember.
Can you talk about
that very well. And I wish I should have thought of this before I came. I wish I had the numbers and the stats from the years that I were there, because they're pretty alarming. It was scary. It was scary as, you know, a leader in the school and as a coach, because I had girls on my team who struggled, and I trying to figure out how to help these kids who, again, feel like a black sheep in this pool of cookie cutter kids, which that probably sounded wrong, but I think you know what I meant. It was also, it's just, I mean, what else can you say other than tragic? It was tragic.
Yeah. And was there a general understanding? Like recently, listeners, there was a Wall Street Journal article about a suicide epidemic that happened in Harriman, I believe, where something like 8 kids all in 1 year. And I remember stats around 6 to 8 a year at Lone Peak. So imagine you're in high school, like, you know, it'd be one would be life-shattering tragic. Imagine you're at a high school and in 1 year, something like 6 to 8 kids kill themselves. And it's just like next month, another one happens and then another one. And, you know, that's kind of, you were there during that time. And again, you have to be careful because there's never one cause and you never know for sure. But as you thought about what was going on, you talk about perfectionism, you talk about the cookie cutter stuff. Is there anything else you want to add just about what would make a Utah high school erupt in 6 to 8 suicides in 1 year?
If I remember correctly, I think the state of Utah got involved with Lone Peak and the administrators there, because what was happening was someone would die by suicide, and it would garnish a lot of attention. I mean, they would throw an assembly. They'd have pictures all over the school. Everyone's crying. Everyone's talking about it. And if I remember correctly, the state had to tell the administrators that they couldn't handle it that way, that we need to tell kids, take any glamour out of it.
Because you don't want to. Why?
Well, so you see that happen, and then there was that Netflix series 13 Reasons Why that came out around the same time, and a lot of people were upset about that, and I totally get it, because it almost, in a way, justifies something that I think shouldn't be justified. It
can kind of, as I understand it, if you spend too much time memorializing the people who killed themselves, number one, it's giving a lot of attention, and who doesn't want attention? And then it's almost glamorizing or memorializing them. They were so smart. They were so loving. They were so that it can maybe in the minds of students make it more appealing.
Yes. Yeah. And I know this is such a dicey
so
subject.
Difficult.
It's really hard. And I know people are very opinionated on it. But my opinion is that we shouldn't be focused, like, suicide isn't okay. It's okay to feel suicidal. It's not okay to kill yourself. There's a big difference, and I think kids need to be taught that.
And yet, it's a choice that, you know, as a therapist, I'm like, I can tell my clients all day long it's not good. Bruce R. McConkie said you don't go to heaven if you know, in Mormon doctrine. Like, that's part of what's complicated, because you can say that it's wrong, don't do it, you'll hurt family members, it's selfish. Like, there are all these things that people pull out, which I think can all, even in themselves, be harmful. But at the end of the day, I've had to learn as a therapist and as a human with people in my life who I love, who have at times felt these sorts of things, that they have that choice. And it's kind of something that people can choose.
It is a choice.
Whether or not we condemn it or tell them it's wrong. Or...
Right. But for young adults and high school students, I wish it was crystal clear to all kids that, again, it's okay if you're struggling. It's okay to want to kill yourself. Like, it's okay to feel that way. You're not wrong for feeling that way. That's in a lot of ways, many, many people feel that way. But going through and going forward with the act of suicide is not okay. And I think that when somebody dies by suicide in a big, again, it gets all of this attention, in some way it makes it okay. It makes the suicide okay, and it's not. And they should be focusing the conversation on allowing kids to feel safe saying that they're having those thoughts, or allowing kids to feel safe expressing their emotions, so that a suicide doesn't happen. That should be the conversation. The conversation shouldn't be about somebody committing suicide or dying by suicide. Does that make sense?
Talk openly about it, get help.
We're here for you. There's a community there for you. There's support, but don't kill yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think it's so complicated because when you're feeling that awful that you would actually do it, someone telling you not to do it or it's bad to do it doesn't matter. Because all that matters is you feel awful and you want it to end. You want the pain to go away. It's just like with self-harm. Who would self-harm? You know, but it makes no sense. But you self-harm when you can't stand the pain anymore, right? Yeah,
and I'm just speaking to the bigger message spread to the masses of kids.
You're saying, don't give up hope.
Well, just what is the school communicating? That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. What is the school communicating? Are they communicating? Because obviously it's very different when you're one-on-one with someone who's in that frame of mind. But what I'm saying, what message spread to the mass, to all the kids in the school about suicide? It shouldn't be that, suicide is this glamorous thing that happens and it's okay. And it should be that it's something that, it's something that can be prevented. That's the thing.
Right.
And it doesn't have to happen. And there are so many things that we can do before we get to that point. Kids need to be taught that they have all these resources and all of the support before they get there.
Right. One of the things I read in the Wall Street Journal article is that because suicide contagion is a thing where it happens and then everyone talks about it and then it happens more, that sometimes mental health professionals or school administrators would deal with that by trying to ignore that it happened, like not talking about it, denying it, suppressing it, telling other people not to talk about it. But my understanding is that people have determined that that's not healthy either. You know what I mean? So there's this.
Yeah, it's a balance.
It's this balance of you want to educate people about it so that they know that there's help and they know where to find help and there's not the stigma and there's this culture of openness and also vulnerability, but also help seeking, but then not glamorizing it, but talking about it, because not talking about it doesn't help it either, right?
I know. These administrators, I can tell you personally, having seen what they went through, I have so much respect for them. They are in a very difficult spot. I think educators, administrators here in Utah have a lot on their plate in that regard, and I have a lot of respect for them because I don't envy that position.
Juliet writes, young people, life changes after puberty, have hope. So Juliet's basically saying it can feel like the end of the world, but in adulthood, things can turn around. That's what Juliet's saying. Hey, Juliet. Somebody else mentions, it's easy for a post-Mormon who may be mad at the church to say, it's the church's, strictness and perfectionism that leads to suicide, right? And I think we have to be careful not to just ever reduce it to just one thing or oversimplify.
Oh, there's no blanket statements. Yeah.
Because let's just say there were no religion, having no community and no sense of purpose and no morality and feeling alone and isolated, that's going to lead to suicide, right? So this is something that I've had to grapple with as someone who sometimes gets frustrated with the church, especially we know that the prevalence of LGBT suicides in Utah are very, very high. And I didn't mention this at the outset, that Utah's youth suicide rate has doubled or tripled in the past 8 or 10 years. And Utah leads the nation in various categories around youth or young men's suicide. On the one hand, how could we not associate some of that with the LGBT suicides that are happening? But again, it's also guns and accessibility of guns. As I understand it, in the Mountain West, particularly. And then it would be easy to say that it's all the, law of chastity, word of wisdom, expectations, high pressure, you got to believe, the stuff that you associate with your sister, especially when things don't go the right way. But then also this Wall Street Journal article brings out, and other people who are watching and listening have brought out, Utah's no fun for the non-Mormons. And so some of those suicides are like, non-Mormons who feel excluded and non-Mormons who don't meet the standards and they feel left out. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sure there's suicides that happen that have nothing to do with Mormonism at all, right? Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts or feelings around any of that, or do you just kind of see it similarly?
I just think if we're talking about how suicide has affected my life and my personal experience and exposure to suicide, and then also what's relative to our community here in Utah, Mormonism is a factor and it needs to be talked about.
And again, it's perfectionism. It's LGBT stuff. But this is
we could not be in more gray of an area. Suicide there. I mean, how could there be any? Just each case is different. You know what I'm trying to say here. Right. This is relative to what we're talking about, but
super
this
complex.
Is so complicated, and every case is different.
Yeah.
So
okay. So you're at Lone Peak, you have sort of like this second confrontation with suicide, but you also have this wonderful experience teaching dance and teaching these girls. Mm-hmm. Why'd you leave Lone Peak?
Why did I leave Lone Peak? Well, I had gotten divorced from Joe, and I think just trying to balance things, working full time. I thought about going back and finishing school. It was just time for me to leave. There was no big reason. It just worked best for me not to coach anymore. Coaching is really hard. So then after I coached, when I was married to Wyatt, we had season tickets to the Jazz for a year, and that's what motivated me really wanting to dance for the Jazz. So then we had season tickets for a year, and then I danced the year after that.
Okay, I'm going to get into that. I have someone, a listener, who is challenging. David writes, statistics do not support a connection between gun control and U.S. suicide rates. I am not an expert on this. I'm certainly not an expert in stats. I'm not anti-gun. So this is a complicated thing. But we're going to be having a few experts on that can really talk about this. But I'm going to read some information that a professional has sent me who is an expert on suicide. So they write, there are so many complex social, economic, and cultural factors in the U.S. and in local communities, such as Harriman, and I'm going to say Alpine, Highland, Lone Peak, that have contributed to the increasing toll of suicide among young people. Issues such as those you point out as possibly being involved, the LDS church and culture. What struck this person the most in reading the article was that all these young people used guns to end their own lives. And the person says, I want to make this case to you as a psychologist and as someone in Utah to whom people listen, that while we work on the deeper systemic and cultural issues that lead people to want to die, there are things we can do to greatly reduce the likelihood that they will. So again, this person's not even trying to make a statistical argument other than how do we reduce successful suicide completions with the people that we love. So let's just narrow what we're talking about. They write, foremost among them is to urge parents to make sure that their kids can't access guns. Okay? So we're not talking about laws that limit guns. We're talking about parents and adults who have access to guns to make sure that their children or loved ones don't have access to the guns. Okay? So I hope that is clarifying, but here's what they write. Though there may be people who are so intent on dying that they will find a way to kill themselves no matter what, there are 4 key observations about suicide that make the case that making sure kids don't have access to a gun can make a difference. And here are the 4 points. Number 1, most people who attempt suicide, even those who make nearly lethal suicide attempts, spend 10 minutes or less between their first thought about making the attempt and the attempt itself. So it happens in a flash. We're talking about you're at this low moment, you hit rock bottom, and they're saying that when people attempt, there's 10 minutes between that realization and the actual attempt. So it's a very short window of time we're talking about. Number 2, many people who attempt suicide do so using the means at hand and don't, in many cases, have an accurate idea about how lethal the method they are using is. An example is kids who take over-the-counter painkillers. Acetaminophen can kill you, ibuprofen basically not. But kids don't know the difference and tend to take what's in the medicine cabinet. So there's they're making the argument that not everyone understands how lethal something is or isn't. And that's a complicating factor, because if you talk about what is more successful or not, that can even be problematic because you're giving people ideas of what the preferred method is. And so again, this is super complicated. The third point is 9 out of 10 people who attempt suicide and survive do not go on to die by suicide. Okay? So there are people who use an ineffective means of attempting where it's not successful and they go on to live and they never die by suicide again. So they work through it. They get help, they get resources, they see a therapist, they get on medication, whatever it needs to. They go on to live happy, healthy lives, never attempt again, according to these statistics. But the final thing is the fraction of suicide attempts that are lethal varies enormously by method. For pills and, let's just say cutting on the wrist, fewer than 5 out of 100 attempts die, whereas 9 out of 10 who use a gun are successful in death. So what these observations mean collectively is that if we can keep someone from attempting suicide with a gun, even if they substitute another method, they will likely survive, not just today, but into the future. For gun-owning parents and adults, this means storing guns at home in a way they are certain their kids, especially kids at risk, can't get to the guns. This may mean changing locks on safes, moving guns from less secure storage, like a locked closet, to a more secure storage like a gun safe. It may also mean, at least while kids are at highest risk, moving guns out of the home so that there's no chance that they could even break into a safe or whatever. So I'm going to share a link from Harvard University on suicide awareness in the show notes so that people can access some of this information, because somebody's writing back saying there's no connection. This is Harvard University. It's an article that's basically entitled Means Matter. It's from the Harvard School of Public Health. I don't think they release things that don't have a substantive empirical base. And it's basically talking about suicide, guns, and public health and why that matters. So forgive me for disrupting Liz's story, your story.
I appreciate that.
But while we're hitting it, I just want to hit it.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything you want to say, agree to or not, or add to that?
I agree, and I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. So you just decided not to do Lone Peak anymore. Mm-hmm. How did you end up cheering for the Jazz? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, so that's because we had the season tickets, and I sat there at the games.
You and your second husband?
Yes.
Season ticket holder. So did you become a Jazz fan?
Yeah. Huge Jazz fan.
Did you grow up watching the Jazz?
My parents were big Jazz fans. I was, but once we were going to games every week, I was hooked.
So do you remember who was playing that first year you really started getting into the Jazz?
The first year, so the year that I danced for the Jazz, not the most recent season, but the season before that.
2017, 2018,
yes.
Right?
So 2016, 2017 was.
Okay, just the year before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Was Gobert there that first year?
Yeah,
Do you
Gobert
remember?
was there.
Was
Gordon
Ricky-
Hayward was still there.
Hayward was there.
Yeah.
Okay, those are fun years.
Yeah, it
Did
was
we make
fun.
the playoffs that?
I don't think we made. Did we make it? Did we make it that year? We for sure made it the year I danced. That was awesome.
But the year before, you're not sure. Okay, so you started getting into jazz. What was it like?
Yeah, it was awesome. Dancing for the Jazz was a really it was a dream come true. It was so much fun. The games were exciting.
So how do you go from being a fan to like getting the idea to dance? Like, talk about that?
I just. Well, I
You just like you
watched
saw
the
them
dancers, and
dancing.
I'm like, I want to do that.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had friends who had danced and.
For the jazz?
Yeah.
From like your years in dancing training
Yeah,
or
just
what?
growing up and, college friends or high school friends that went on and danced.
And what were the things why did you want to dance for the jazz? What was going through your mind?
Well, a big thing that was going through, I thought, I've danced my entire life. I've dedicated so many hours, so much time, and I've taught and given back already. The one thing that I have left to do in my dance career is dance professionally myself. So I wanted that opportunity to, really see if I could. There aren't many professional dance teams in Utah. And so in the dance world, to be able to make the Utah Jazz Dancers, it's a big deal. And so I wanted to really, make that kind of pinnacle in my dance career. And yeah. And on top of that, I was a huge jazz fan. It looked like a lot of fun. It was dance styles that I was familiar with. So
hip hop and
jazz, all of that. So it was so fun.
So how did you get in? Who'd you talk to?
So the audition process, you just audition.
Go website? Was there a website?
Yeah.
Like how to be a jazz dancer?
Yeah, if you want to try out, their auditions are coming up in July.
Okay.
So you can find all their information online. But yeah,
how do you apply? You just fill out an application?
And then show up on the first day of
What's
auditions.
What's that like? That
it's
first
a week-long process.
Okay.
The audition process is rough.
Okay.
So the first day
How many women were there?
I think we had like 120 my year.
And where was it? Where was it?
It was held at
like a high school?
West High School for some of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did they have you do?
So you learn a routine the first day, and then they make a cut. The first day they cut it to top 50. Then top 50 goes to a 3-day camp kind of where you work out really, really hard and you learn routines and you're performing in front of judges.
That first day when you eventually made the top 50, what was that like? Was it easy? Like you'd done it so long?
No, it was terrifying. It was so hard. There were so many beautiful, talented girls that showed up.
There were a lot?
Oh, yeah. And they were all good and they were all pretty. And it was
like as you
really
ranked yourself compared to everyone else, were you
when I walked in the door, I almost walked out.
Why?
Because I was too intimidated. I walked in, I'm like, there's so many girls here, way more girls than I thought there were going to be. And like I said, everyone was in great shape and they were all good dancers and good performers. And I was very intimidated. So I almost left, but I stayed.
Okay, you stayed.
Stayed. And then if you make it through, so then they cut to top 50.
When you saw them dancing, were you like, oh, I'm better than most of these? Or like, no. Or like, I don't belong here. These are way better than me. Like what?
No.
As you saw them dance.
As I saw them dance, I mean, there was a lot of talent that showed up. I was scared the whole time, John. Like, I didn't think I was going to make it. Every cut, I'm like, oh, I made it. Okay. Like, I was intimidated the whole time.
Okay, so there's the first 50 the first day, then you go to a more intense camp.
Yeah.
Do they pay you to try out?
No.
Is there any compensation for tryout?
No.
Okay, so you go to the second day.
So then you go to the 3 days.
It's 3 days.
That are
with 50 girls.
Uh-huh.
For how many slots?
They're going to cut it to top 30.
Okay.
So then top 30.
Okay. So 50. Let's talk about the 50 first. So
that's the most intense part of the audition because you go and they have a trainer and he kicks your ass, and then
Meaning what?
Like just puts you through a very
push-ups. Like what? We're jogging. Like what?
Anything you can think of, like ladders, sprints, push-ups, sit-ups. I mean, all of it. So
like how many hours a day?
The workouts. They're probably only an hour and a half long for the workout.
But super intense.
But very, 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 very intense. And I'm an athletic person. I work out every day, and those workouts were insane.
Okay.
So, and then after you're done working out, you have to learn another routine. So you work out really hard, and then you stay and you learn another routine, and then you've got to perform it in front of judges, and Then once it's cut to top 30, they do interviews. So they'll take the top 30 and you'll do a one-on-one interview with the judges, because it's important as a jazz dancer. You are a representative of the community. And so you've got to be able to speak publicly, not just perform on the court. So you go through the interview process, and then they announce the team later that day. And you dance one more time that last day.
And so how many end up making it?
There were 16.
Oh, so it goes from 50 to 16.
Well, 50 to 30 to
50
16.
to 30 to 16.
So it's about a 50% cut each time.
So what was that like to get it?
It was so awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was something I really, really wanted, and something I'd worked really hard for. And it was like a dream come true. It sounds cheesy, but when you put that much effort and energy into something, I had prepared for months for it. So to see, you went on the website and they had every girl's headshot that had made the team. And I remember just seeing my headshot. I was in the grocery store with my sister, and I was like running down the aisles, like so stoked. It was so fun.
Yeah.
It was really exciting.
I mean, the jazz mean a lot to this community. I mean, in some ways, sometimes more than religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and the jazz that's a lot of the heart of Utah. And the organization itself is great. I mean, my coach was incredible. The girls that I got to meet, what I appreciate about the jazz is they focus a lot on personal development for us as women, not just as dancers. So giving us opportunities to, again, give back in the community, to become better public speakers, you meet a lot of interesting people. It's an awesome networking opportunity on top of being just a lot of fun.
Okay. Before I talk to you about like the actual, any exposure you had to the players or like any fun stories, I'm going to ask you kind of sometimes I ask hard questions on Mormon Stories. Okay. And I'm going to ask you some hard questions.
These have all been hard.
Have they all been hard?
This is the easy part right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. So I'm torn about cheerleading. And let me just tell you, and I'm sure you've heard it all and thought of it all, but forgive me while I just am authentic and just speak off the cuff. Sure. So I dated Renee Zellweger in high school. She was a cheerleader. So on the one hand, and when I got to see you dance because we became friends. Yeah. The year you danced 1 year or two?
Just one.
Okay, I was friends with you, so I got to. Yeah. And I had a friend who had courtside seats, so I got to watch you dance, and I got to watch the dancers. So on the one hand, it is not your grandmother's cheerleading, right? The dancers, that's intense dance. Like it's professional dance. Yeah. It's incredibly athletic, incredibly skilled. The routines, the physical demands, like it's as technical and as difficult and as demanding of a sport, I imagine, as any other professional sport on some level. Is that fair to say? Not fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've put in just as many hours and just as much effort and energy and the athleticism behind it. People don't appreciate it because they don't recognize technique and they don't understand what goes into the movement and all of that. But we put just as much in as any other professional athlete, 100%. Yeah,
right. And if you look at Broadway dancers or you look at ballet dancers or classic dancers or modern dancers or all the people on So You Think You Can Dance or the choreographer, it's legit professional athleticism and skill that deserves to be respected, highly respected, which doesn't fit sort of like the cheerleader stereotype, which is like, oh, bubbly, giggly, right? Shallow, whatever it is. Yeah. So on the one hand, I'm like mad. The skill level is out of this world, amazing. Yeah. Okay. So here's where I'm ambivalent. I have a problem just with the idea of cheerleading that it's a sexist, it's a feminist thing, right? Guys can be feminists too. Just the idea that women are selected to cheer on the men. You know what I mean? That it's the men who everyone's watching, and then the women are standing on the sidelines cheering the men. As someone who's trying to be a feminist, learning about feminism, structurally, it bothers me. Like,
well, we have to be clear about something.
Okay.
The jazz dancers aren't really cheerleaders.
Okay.
I mean, we'll go up
so
on
talk
the
about that.
concourse
Talk about that.
and we'll cheer one quarter a game and lead, the audience in cheers or whatever. But we're not there. I mean, we're not really cheering on the players.
Okay.
We're there as entertainment value for timeouts, halftime.
So you're entertainers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like we're different than, like a college cheer team.
Okay.
It's very different.
Can you see my point about that? Just like even in high school.
I see your point about it.
Do you have a thought about that? Like, is it sexist? Is it lame? Is it okay? Is there something beautiful about it? Now we're talking about high school. High school cheerleaders standing on the sidelines with pom-poms. Go team, go.
But this is my difference. I wasn't a cheerleader in high school.
No, I know.
Dancer,
but I'm saying, can you?
But if you ask me to have an opinion about that.
Is there something wrong with that? Is there not? Am I being too progressive? Like, or do you even have a perspective?
Well, I was never a cheerleader, so I've never thought about this.
Okay. Oh, you've never thought about this?
I've never,
okay.
I mean, no. I probably
and it's not fun. Like, it's kind of a buzzkill, right?
I probably should have thought about it, but no. Yeah, I haven't given much thought to it.
Okay, so the jazz, are they called the jazz dancers?
Yeah.
They're not even called
dancers,
cheerleaders.
Right.
Okay, so I shouldn't even say you were, did I write? You were a cheerleader for the jazz? So
that's okay. No.
Oh, I said a professional dancer. Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing. They're not cheerleaders, they're dancers.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's one thought I had. And then another thought I had is just, and this is hard to talk about, so bear with me. Like, when I think about eating disorders, when I think about perfectionism, when I think about gender roles, all that stuff, right? I think about CoverGirl magazines and beauty expectations and like, I'm so torn because who doesn't love beauty? Who doesn't love to look at a beautiful man or woman? Who doesn't love someone who just looks gorgeous or who is super fit or who, everyone, we all are probably trained on some level to just love beauty and love aesthetics, right? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's a part of me that, like, because I wasn't super popular and there were always the kids that were more handsome or, and part of me is just my Mormon upbringing where felt like I was taught to look deeper and to go for the more deep things. Like the objectification stuff, like it's sometimes some of this stuff can be highly sexualized. Sometimes it's objectifying, sometimes it's holding up glamour and a certain type of beauty that then could have societal repercussions. Either it's objectifying, let's just say in this case, the women who are a part of it. And I'm sure modeling is something similar, right? It's objectifying the people involved in it. And then sometimes I think about the collateral social impact of people who don't measure up or aren't as beautiful or don't have the same body types or whatever. Do they feel bad about themselves and body image and again, so all the sexualizing, the objectification, and then the collateral damage of everybody else feeling not as pretty or not as cute or not as fit. I don't even know how to describe it, but I have those thoughts in my mind. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Or is that,
absolutely.
I hope that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable.
No, I would love to talk about that. So first, I would like to pay another compliment to the Jazz, and that is management is very particular about what style of dance is being done, how the costuming is, or, what costumes are worn. And an important aspect of that is that things aren't over-sexualized, and I really appreciate that. If you watch the Utah Jazz dancers in comparison to other NBA teams, to some other NBA teams, they're a lot more technical. We do a lot more jazz. We do a lot more true technical dancing rather than just this over-sexualized entertainment. And I appreciate that. I think that's a unique and awesome thing about being a Utah Jazz dancer. Now,
so that's compared to other NBA dance teams?
Yeah.
It's more dance sophisticated?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Are the jazz dancers known as some of the best ones in the NBA?
Well, I mean...
Or do even people know?
The Utah Jazz are the best. No, I mean, we just have...
Do teams have reputations?
Yeah, they do. And the Jazz, we have a different style. I mean, I guess I'm not a dancer now, so I can't say that. But I think the Utah Jazz dancers stand out in their own way because, they have their own style. They're a lot more technical. They're a lot, like I said.
Would that be something that another NBA team dancers would know? Like,
is there... I mean, you can watch our... Yeah.
You can just see it?
You can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't really paid attention to other.
Yeah. Pay attention next time you go.
There's
like,
there's
go
a
to
big
Miami
difference.
Heat game.
There's a big difference?
A big difference.
In terms of like the skill level?
I don't know
and
about skill level, but just the choreography.
The choreography.
And
the sophistication.
The sophistication.
Okay.
So, but if we take, so leaving all the jazz talk aside and just talking about what you're mentioning.
Beauty and
speaking in general
glamour
with the dancer, that is something that I have thought so much about. I've often asked myself if I'd allow my daughter to dance, because I know what it was like for myself and how it affected body image and eating habits and the perfectionism. It's alive and well in the dance community. It's a huge issue.
Are eating disorders kind of more prevalent? It's kind of prevalent? Okay.
I would
and I'm sure that's true in running. I know that's true in cross country and track, gymnastics. Like, it's not just, you know.
I don't know many dancers who haven't struggled with that.
Okay.
So yeah, I've experienced it on such a real level myself that I don't even know if I would put my daughter in dance.
Really?
Yeah, it's hard. The pressure is really intense as far as your physical appearance, especially in ballet. I had a ballet teacher growing up who would come over to us and like smack our stomachs or pinch our fat, or, you know, tell us that we weighed too much, and we were high school girls. So yeah, it's definitely an issue.
There's a dark side, or a cost. Sure. There's a cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it carries into adulthood. It's hard not to, those habits that they were ingrained in me, I feel, growing up, because I was expected to look a certain way. And, you know, and it was prettier to watch someone who was thinner dancing or whatever. And that, a lot of that pressure has carried into adulthood, and I'd be lying to say that it hasn't. And yeah, also I think that just in general, if appearance or beauty becomes too much if there's too much of a value placed on it, I'm having a hard time trying to articulate what I want to say, but yeah, it's hard to unlearn some of those things. I'm kind of butchering this, but hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying.
No. Thank you for being willing to talk about this. Let me ask you from a different angle. Men and women notice and appreciate beautiful men and women, right? And there's sort of this standard for beauty that either we all can appreciate, or most of us can appreciate, or that, let's just say, many women would want to achieve. And so when I think about, you know, there's kind of like, in a superficial way to view society, there's like the beautiful people, and then there's everybody else, you know, all the rest of us that aren't magazine model beautiful, right? Are there, and of course, when you have privilege, like beauty, let's just say beauty or appearance is a privilege, or being fit or whatever is a privilege, because you'll get societal benefits from it. You would never want to go, oh my gosh, poor me, I'm so beautiful, or I'm so handsome, like, oh, pity me. However, when I try and really put on my empathy and my humanity, I imagine there are some real hard things or downsides or difficulties about being super handsome or super beautiful or super fit. Is that something you can talk to? Because I'm really curious about that.
Well, I don't know that I'm like, how do I answer?
I know, because you're thinking, well, I don't want to make people think that I think I'm beautiful.
I don't think that. Yeah, that's not what I'm trying. I'm not thinking that. But what I can say is, and even recognizing it in some friends that I have, like if I have friends that are models or other dancers or whatever, like I said, if there's been an expectation on you at a certain level, you've always got to keep that expectation. You've always got to hit that expectation. So for some, like I know some women, bloggers, influencers, and they tell me, I always have to be on. I always have to look this way. I always have to walk out of my house camera ready, because I don't know who I'm going to see. And I imagine the same is true, you know, for models, and it is especially true for dancers, that if we weigh a certain way, we've got to always maintain that weight or maintain that image. So I would think the most difficult thing about what you're saying is just that maybe we don't allow ourselves to be human enough. I know that if, you know, in the past when I really struggled maybe with some of the eating with body image, I would say, it's like you put 5 pounds on and you struggle with your self-esteem over something as minimal as 5 pounds. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the pressure is really difficult. And so, yeah.
Do you ever have to worry about like, does he love me for me, or is it just because he thinks I'm beautiful? Like, is that, I imagine that might be going through your head. Just like if someone's rich or famous, they always have to worry about, are they being loved for who they are?
Well, I don't see myself that way. You don't
see yourself as,
I feel like I'm not like thinking I'm some ultra beautiful person. And so I'm trying to think about other people that I know and what maybe is going on.
So you don't think of yourself that way. Is that because you want to be modest and humble, or because you really don't see yourself that way?
I guess I don't know. I have never been asked some of these questions.
Really? Am I embarrassing you?
Yeah.
I told you, I warned you it'd be a little hard.
I know, this is hard. Jeez, because how do I answer this? I don't want to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm so beautiful, and let me tell you how hard that is and what that's really like. But I don't want to say I think I'm, I have low self-esteem, or I feel like I'm at a good place with where I'm at. I don't know that I'm.
So you feel good about things, and but you also want to be humble and, not assume things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know this is hard stuff. I'm just trying to make sense of it all. I can imagine somebody saying, yeah, it's awesome to be attractive or super fit. You know what I mean? And then I can also imagine somebody saying, especially if like there's a woman who's feeling bad about her body, or a woman who's feeling bad about her appearance or whatever, it's like, yeah, but you know what? There's a dark side too. Like,
well, I will say this, and this is something that also speaks to my experience in, dating outside of the church. I've seen how I feel like dating in the church is a little bit differently. And this is actually something that I miss. I feel like a lot of times dating inside the church, people really care about your character. They care about your life goals. They want to know who you really are and what you really want. And I've seen dating outside of the church, I have seen a lot of that just shallow surface level stuff where, there is a lot that goes on where women truly are only valued because of how they look, and men are valued for how much money they have, or it's definitely less fulfilling. I've seen that for sure. And I miss that about dating culture inside of Mormonism, because I guess that is true. You do wonder. You see how women and everybody kind of feeds into it too, because there are women who capitalize on their looks, like these Instagram models and girls that are out there, dressing half naked, and that's the value they're giving to themselves because they're feeding the cycle is what I'm trying to say. They're feeding this culture, and they're capitalizing on their looks, and I think it's totally shallow and unhealthy.
So have you had to kind of process that and have goals or perspectives to help you be exactly the person you want to be in that environment, of all these dancers, all these talent, all this beauty? Is there a way to lose yourself versus like really get focused on who absolutely. You want to be? How have you kind of channeled all of this for who you want to be and how you want to live? Yeah,
I've had to check myself, because I'm not, I've definitely, and this speaks to a much bigger picture if we're talking social media and all of that. But I have had to check myself, because I know when I'm putting out certain, if I'm, I just look at what kind of response I'm getting. Again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier with drinking and sex. Where do I want to be in the long term? And when it comes to dating, same thing. If I'm going to put myself out there in a certain way, I'm going to get a certain response. And I'd be lying to say that I don't. And so I have to just try to stay focused on what I want long term and who I truly am. But is it easy to get caught up in? Yeah, it is. And it's real. And that all that stuff really happens. So staying true to that moral code that you define for yourself, it's a lifelong process. Like, that's a lifelong process, listening and being true to yourself. But that plays into it as well.
Okay. Thanks for taking the hard.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
What I'm trying to say.
Okay. So what's it like to be a jazz dancer? What's the routine? It
is so much. People don't.
Is it a job,
understand.
First of all? Is it a job?
Yes, it's a job.
Okay.
And it is.
Does it pay awful, medium, incredible? Are you even able to talk about that? I don't want to embarrass you.
I mean, I'm not a jazz dancer right now, so I can say whatever I want. The pay's not good.
Yeah?
It's actually surprising how bad the pay is. That's why I didn't go back for another season. I didn't audition for the second year because the pay is so low for what a time commitment it is. It's
Margie asked me to talk about this because I think there was some scandal where the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, they were selling these calendars, they were making all this money, and the cheerleaders were getting none of it. And I think they even had to like unionize or something because they were basically just being exploited. And I'm not like saying, were you exploited? But I mean, it sounds like you felt like you weren't paid your worth.
Oh,
maybe.
The pay. But it's kind of just this unspoken understanding that if you're using the Utah Jazz Dancer, that's a resume builder, that's a networking opportunity, that's an experience, that's a privilege, that's an honor in the dance community here in Utah. So I think we all just accept it for what it is. Is it right? No.
There's kind of a sexist, discriminatory element because you're just as much of an athlete as these basketball players.
And how much money is in this industry?
Right.
And they can't pay the dancers what they're worth.
Right.
It's kind of a joke.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, but being a dancer itself is so much fun.
Yeah.
They do, so a typical week, it gets crazy. I mean, 4-hour practices. So you could have a game day, they get there at 2 o'clock, and then they're there until 10 p.m. So you could have a game Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a 4-hour practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, public appearances on top of that, community service on top of that, learning new routines. I mean, it's a major.
How many hours a week?
Commitment. I feel like it's another full-time job.
So it's 40 hours a week?
Give her
30?
Depending on where we're at in the season. But yeah, it can be full-time. And if you take on enough appearances, it can be your full-time job.
So minimum 30 hours a week?
I mean, minimum 25.
Okay. But it can go as high as 40? Mm-hmm. Okay. But are you paid hourly, or are you just paid a flat fee, or?
Yeah, paid hourly.
Like if you do community things, do you get paid for that? You're just on the clock, basically?
Well, yeah.
Clocking in, clocking out? Mm-hmm. Okay. And, so practices are how many hours? So most of these women have part-time jobs or don't work, or what?
When I was on the team, I think there were only like 4 or 5 of us that had full-time jobs because it is so difficult to manage. So you had
a full-time job?
Yes.
So you were working 75 hours a week?
Yeah. It was killer. That's why I didn't do it again. That's why I didn't do another season.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but a lot of the girls, it's really ideal for girls that are in school or just working part-time because it's such a major time commitment.
Okay. What can you tell us about just the lifestyle other than just how demanding it is? Is fun? It's
fun. It's so fun. You have you're at the game greeting and little girls come up to you and they just like tell you, they want to hold your pom-pom, and you get to interact with the fans, and they do a lot of really meaningful service too, which is awesome.
Like what?
I appreciate that. Well, they do during Christmas, they do a bunch of different, like 12 days of giving. So they'll choose 12, different things that they want to do. I mean, they do a ton. They work with hospitals, they work with schools, they work with youth. They do a lot. The Utah Jazz in general is really awesome in that aspect. And
so you were involved in all that?
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Yeah, it's so awesome. It's so fun. Yeah.
Okay. Game day, like what's interesting about game day? Like
game day, games are a lot of fun. Playoff games are even more fun. But we would get there at 2:30. We'd practice on the court before the visiting team came out to practice. So we'd set the routines, practice for a couple of hours, or I can't remember how long our practices were, an hour and a half. Go get ready, hair and makeup, and then go and greet fans before the game. Then, we come out, we get to cheer while they're doing player intros, usually dance twice a game. And then, yeah.
There's only 2 dances per game? Mm-hmm. Seems like there's more.
Well, we come out a lot to do like hot timeouts and to, interact with the fans, and they'll call us out for different things or have different dancers go do different promotional events throughout the game.
What's it like having, 20,000? How many people fill up the Delta Center, whatever it's called now?
I think it's 20,000.
Is it called the Vivint Center? What's it called?
Vivint Smart Home, yeah.
How many people are there?
I think 20.
What's it like having 20,000 people cheering?
It is so scary. Before I would go out for a game, I just couldn't even look. I had to just focus, like look at the ground, go through the routine in my head, run out. I would always find someone in the audience and just watch them while I danced.
Why?
Then I didn't realize how many people were there. And sometimes I'd make eye contact with that person and it was really awkward. But it was good. It was a good way to distract from the fact that 20,000 people could watch you.
Yeah, because I was watching you on the front, front court seats. And I was like, how do they maintain their focus with all the different people walking around and all the things going on? People are getting popcorn, nachos, standing up, talking to their friends. Someone might trip or fall down. But it looked like you were looking at one thing and just. Yeah,
that's because I would just choose one. But one time
and you did smile. I think you knew I was there because you smiled, but you had to do it really subtly.
Yeah. No, one time I got turned around. I don't know what caught me off, but I ended up running. So we're supposed to exit to a certain tunnel, and I ran the opposite direction. So all of the girls are running this way, and I'm running towards the visiting players bench. And I remember cheering, running off, and seeing the visiting players staring at me like, "Why is this dancer running towards us?" And then I realized at the very end that I'd gone the wrong way, so I had to sprint the entire court by myself the other way. That was my most embarrassing moment.
What rules do they have about behavior?
It's very strict.
Talk about all the rules.
I mean, obviously, there's a drug policy. You can't have any. You need to be very careful about.
So no marijuana, or they drug test?
Yeah,
drug testing?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep, drug testing. No. You have to be very mindful about what you're putting on social media. You don't
put what? What don't you put?
Well.
What are the things that get people in trouble or they don't like?
Anything that could be anything. But it's a conservative organization. So, nothing that's overly sexual or in any partying or anything like that.
Even in your private life?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because people know that you're a jazz dancer and they associate you with the Utah Jazz. And that image is very important to the Utah Jazz, rightfully so. So you have to be very careful about what you're putting out there. And you can't fraternize at all with the players.
You can never go out on a date with a player.
That's the thing. People think you're friends with the players. They think you're dating the players, but you'll be kicked off the team if you are. So.
Do the players know that?
Yeah.
And do they respect that? Do they ever not respect that?
Oh my gosh. I can't answer this. Oh my. Well, I'm not a jazz dancer anymore, so it doesn't matter. But no, they don't always respect that.
So you have to kind of, if you want to keep your job.
Yeah, you have to tell them to bug off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're on contract for what, 6 months or 5 months?
A year.
Or for a full year?
Yeah. Well, really till the season ends.
Okay.
But yeah, really until auditions the next season.
And you say they're in May.
They're in July. Yeah.
So it's kind of July to
July.
Okay.
Really.
Okay, so the players do they not know the rules or do they just not care?
They know the rules, they don't care.
Okay, so, did you ever see a cheerleader, or did you ever see a dancer get kicked off or get in trouble for that? Does that happen? I imagine it might happen.
I won't speak to anything that happened my season because I don't know.
Talk about other seasons.
But I'm sure it's happened. I've heard rumors that girls have been kicked off for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there are girls who are willing to, play with fire, and I think it's silly. And you, especially again in the Utah dance world, this is like an honor. This is an awesome thing to be able to make the Utah Jazz, and I would never jeopardize that for something.
So it meant so much to you that even though this player and I'm not saying it happened to you, but let's just say if it could have happened, right? This would be a handsome person, an athletic person, a very rich person, a famous person. One would think, well, that's really tempting, right?
I know. I would
that's
just
an
say
opportunity.
To girls, don't let it get to your head. It's so not worth it. That's so dumb.
Okay. So what, I'm sure this is really sensitive thing to talk about, but like interaction with players is something we'd all be curious about, both just because of the level of status of an NBA player, but then we start thinking about real people, like Rudy Gobert or Ricky Rubio or whoever it is that we would be thinking about. Like, people would want to know anything about that. So is there anything that you could say just about?
Well, I can say, so I had a couple of the players that I knew before I danced for the team that I was friends with, and I'm friends with now today, and they're awesome. What most
talk about the players. What can you tell us about the players? Okay, so by name or even just in general.
Okay. So while I was on the team, I didn't hang out with players, even the ones that I was friends with before. But I was very honest about, hey, I'm already friends with these guys. I know them, whatever. But
because you knew some of them from before?
Yeah, I knew some of them from before. Okay. And then, like I said, friends with some now.
Okay.
And what surprised me most about 99% of the players is that they are very down to earth and very humble and just really cool, nice, fun guys. So I've had some interactions and they've all been really positive. I think the Utah Jazz has an amazing team on and off the court, and that might sound corny, but it's true. They're really cool guys.
Was Donovan playing your year that you played? Mm-hmm. So his rookie season.
Was his rookie season.
Okay. Did you get the of the?
I've never interacted with Donovan.
Okay. What about Joe or, are there any interactions you can talk about of any of these players that people would be like, they'd want to hear positive things or good things or whatever, crazy things? Are there any interactions you can talk about? No. And if you can't, that's fine.
Probably not any. Yeah, probably not like any specific things. Just generally for people to know that the players are actually really cool and they're super nice.
Would you guess that some of these guys are just true family men, or would it be? I imagine it would be super hard to be like a family man.
Yeah, you are asking the hardest question.
You don't have to answer. So just say, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't have a comment on that. I'm just saying I would imagine
never want my husband playing a professional sport.
Yeah? Well, you imagine that it would be hard. Why?
Well, they just, they have girls that, it's the status, it's the attention. Girls they have access to to anyone and whoever and whenever and wherever they go, and they travel a lot. And I think there's a culture in professional sports that probably isn't ideal for somebody who's looking for a family.
Yeah. Do you have anything you were able to witness just about what it's like to be an athlete at that level? Like the pressures, the intensity, the conflicts, the behind the scenes stuff. Like what did you see about a professional basketball player's life or the demands of the job?
Well, just even being that close to them at a game, you realize we tend to forget, right, that they're humans. I think about Donovan Mitchell all the time and how much pressure he must be under. And these are just men. They're gifted athletes, but they're men. And so they have real emotions. And so to see the emotions on the court when things don't go the way that they had hoped, or to see the coaches' pressure that they put on them or the pressure that the coaches feel, it's intense. They have a lot of people's faith riding on them. And especially here in Utah, where the Utah Jazz are such a big deal because they're our team. I can't even imagine.
Because there's no pro football team, there's no pro baseball team, there's no pro hockey team.
Right.
It's the only legit pro team in Utah.
It's a big deal here. And so, they're under immense pressure. And it would be really, really hard to disconnect as an athlete, and not take it personally.
Did you see any real moments of grace or inspiration in all that on the part of the players?
I think what has been most inspiring to me is to see the players' interactions when we would do like community events or appearances, how they genuinely interact with their fans. They are incredible. They'll, talk to them for however long and respond to the kids that come up to them. They really are genuine people in how they interact with the fans.
Okay.
It's cool.
Anything about the business of professional basketball that's interesting or worth mentioning?
Probably not.
Okay. Anything about Mormonism specifically as it relates to the Utah Jazz or professional basketball? Like someone asked, playing on Sunday, is that weird for the Mormons? Or is there anything related to Mormonism specifically that you found to be interesting in your relations with you? Because it's owned by the Miller family. They're They're Mormons.
Well, you can feel the influence. That's all I'll say. You can feel the influence in how they manage the media, how they manage the entertainment, how they manage the players. I mean, there's without a doubt, Utah Jazz is highly conservative. So that obviously comes from an LDS influence.
Did you guys ever travel?
Just home
you
games.
never
42
never
home
travel.
games a year, but no traveling.
42 home games. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for handling those hard questions too. Anything else you want to say about that? About what it's like? Why'd you stop? You just too much work.
Too much work for too little pay.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth.
Yeah. Would you ever go back? Have you ever thought about it?
I think it's ideal for somebody that's in their early 20s, like going through college. I think I probably wouldn't go back.
Is part of that just lifestyle wise? Is it physically too demanding?
Yeah, both.
Okay, so the older you get, the harder it's going to be to perform at that level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for talking about that.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote, "I was here for the suicide info, not into sports." So sorry, Julie.
Sorry.
We can't have a jazz cheerleader on and not talk about
dancer,
it. Dancer,
not a cheerleader.
Dancer. Thank you, jazz dancer. Is that what you call it, jazz dancer?
Yes, Utah Jazz dancer.